Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mindfulness in Education Summit. Daniel Goleman is our next speaker. He's an author, psychologist, and science journalist. He wrote the book Emotional Intelligence, which changed the face of social emotional learning in schools, companies, and organizations. And he's written many other books. Focus is one of my favorites. And his latest, Altered Traits, Science Reveals How Meditation Changes Your Mind, Brain, and Body, which was co-written with Richie Davidson. He's also the co-founder of CASTLE, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, which many of teachers watching will know about, and we'll have links to all those things on Daniel's speaker page. But I just want to say it's a real honor. Daniel's had a major influence in my own career, and I followed him around the world to several events. So truly honored and grateful to have you with us today. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I love the idea of mindfulness education. I think it's very important.
Yes, we're all trying to move that forward. So let's start, if you could give us a brief definition of emotional intelligence, and then tell us how mindfulness relates to that.
Okay, yeah. So emotional intelligence refers to how we manage ourselves, our self-awareness, and how we handle our relationships, particularly empathy, tuning into other people, having harmonious relationships, working together toward a goal, and so on. Within each of the four parts of emotional intelligence, those parts are self-awareness, self-management, empathy, and social skill. There are embedded 12 competencies that make people highly effective, particularly in a workplace, for example, for educators or for principals, for heads of schools. You can find out more about those in a series of primers I've just finished, actually, on each of them, which is available from Keystep Media. KeystepMedia.com is another URL you ought to give. But at any rate, I think that mindfulness helps people enormously with self-management. And I think it can also help a lot with presence to other people. So I think that those are the points of contact between those two modules.
Great, thank you. So I know you've done lots of meta-analysis of studies and things. So what does the latest research tell us about bringing mindfulness into schools, and maybe a little bit about the differences in preschools, elementary, and high schools, and what's really working effectively in those different age ranges?
The data that I have access to is not specific to age level of schools, but rather in the book I just finished with Richard Davidson, Altered Traits. It's called Science and Meditation in Commonwealth Countries. We looked at the best studies of what the effects are of mindfulness training, and what it showed that very quickly, really from the beginning, you see what we call short-term effects, and which become longer the longer you persist in the practice. And several of them have to do with attention, which sharpens the ability to focus, the ability to keep your concentration high, to remember, which is the essence of learning. In fact, there was one study that showed that students score better on achievement tests as a result of that. The other set of findings, which I think are interactive with that, have to do with how well children and adults can manage their upsetting emotions, anxiety, anger, and so on. And it shows that it makes students less often triggered, that when they do get upset, they get less upset and they recover more quickly. And there's basically a dose-response relationship, as it's called in medicine, where the more you do it, the more hours you put in over a lifetime, the stronger the effects tend to become.
Right, great. So it's definitely something that's having positive effects in schools around the world.
Well, I would say that anywhere that a school brings in mindfulness, which you can also think of as a kind of mental fitness exercise.
Yeah.
It helps students get better at the fundamental cognitive abilities that they need to be good students.
Yeah.
The underlying skill from a technical point of view in cognitive science, it's called cognitive control.
Okay.
And it means that you can manage your attention as you want. You can keep your eye on your goal. You can keep your eye on the task at hand, not get distracted. And cognitive control turns out to be a better predictor of people's health and financial success in adulthood than does your childhood IQ or the wealth of the family you grew up in. So it really levels the playing field for children.
Yeah, great. And what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions teachers might have or parents might have about bringing mindfulness into school?
Did you say the biggest reservations?
Or misconceptions?
Misconceptions. Well, I think one is that this is in some way a religious practice. It's not.
Right. Yeah.
It comes straight out of cognitive science, neuroscience, and while there have been similar methods used in spiritual traditions, the ones that are used in schools are detached from that, removed from that context entirely, and they're given to children in a way that it's just another kind of training, like gym. So I think that's one common misconception. The other might be an over-expectation. It might be that you expect too much from it because the changes we see, in neuroplasticity and the changes in the brain, changes in cognitive abilities happen gradually and slowly. So you can't expect miracles either. So I think that people can have misconceptions in either direction.
Right. Yeah, that's very true. I think you try it once and happen, right? Yeah. So when we think about the reservations, a lot of teachers maybe that aren't doing these things in their classroom, they're feeling overwhelmed and they already have a lot to do. So can you talk a little bit about what some of the benefits would be of putting these types of programs or tools into the classroom, and whether we should put, just mindfulness programs or whole social emotional programs that would incorporate mindfulness?
So you mentioned that I was one of the many co-founders of CASTLE, which is a group that has been doing promoting and rigorous research on social emotional learning. And I just wrote a book with Peter Senge at MIT called The Triple Focus in Education, which is also available from Keystep Media. But we argue in the book that one of the next steps for social emotional learning is to integrate mindfulness, because it buttresses the very skills you're trying to help children with. Right. So I see them as going hand in hand. I wouldn't say it's mindfulness or SEL. I think the best way to do it is mindfulness with SEL, integrated with other ways that children can learn to manage impulse, to be more self-aware, to understand their feelings better and manage them better, to empathize more, and to get along better. I think it's a package.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think more and more schools are bringing in all different things, but they're just not sure how to put things together yet. So hopefully we'll get some more guidance from CASTLE. So can you tell us a little bit about bringing compassion into school, and if you feel that compassion will help us create a more peaceful world, and what the research that you've looked at says about that? Are there things that you've seen that are very effective to bring into schools?
Yes. So mindfulness strengthens connections in one part of the brain. As I said, is the part for managing attention, for managing upsetting emotions. But there are other mental exercises, one centering on what's called sometimes loving kindness or kindness, where you generate the idea of, you thank people, gratitude for people who've been kind to you, the wish that good things happen to you, to people you love, and then to a wider and wider circle, which includes people you know, and people in your region, in your city, in your school, and people everywhere. What that seems to do is to strengthen brain circuitry for caring about people. It's a basis of compassion, of course. And to the extent that this is active circuitry, I would think that it would lessen us and them antagonisms, which are at the base of conflicts, all conflicts.
Yeah.
We don't have that data, but I think it's rather logical, actually.
Yeah. It would be, I think, a real step forward to see that coming into schools with all the things that are happening in the world. If we can just get that compassion as part of everyone's curriculum, I think huge changes would occur. So, Daniel, what advice would you give to, say, a teacher who is new to this and they just want to start to bring some kind of practice into their classroom? What's the first thing they should do?
You're saying a kindness practice, not a mindfulness practice?
Yeah, a mindfulness practice.
Yes. Well, the simplest way to do it is probably to use the recordings, for example, by Linda Lantieri has a very good set that's appropriate. It's actually my voice on those recordings. I was in a school in Spanish Harlem, 7-year-olds. Spanish Harlem is a very impoverished area of New York City. And they were using this, and half the kids in the class had what are called special needs, ADHD and so on. I thought the class would be very chaotic, but it was not. It was very calm and very focused. And the teacher said it was because of this exercise they do every day for a few minutes, where the student takes their favorite stuffed animal, lies down on the floor, puts on their belly, watches it rise on the in-breath and fall on the out-breath and rise. It's basically mindfulness for 7-year-olds. And keeps them calm. And one of the benefits of doing this in the classroom is that it makes kids more focused on learning. You spend less time having to tell them be quiet, behave, and so on. And it also helps teachers. It's calm too. It's not just the kids.
Yeah.
So I think that the benefits are in a more focused, more attentive, and less tumultuous classroom, which helps teachers, of course. Less stress for the teacher.
Yeah, definitely. I think the more you do it, the more it helps both sides, and they both learn from each other. So it's a great thing to bring into a classroom. So what's your vision for mindfulness in education for globally? Then what do you want to see happen in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years?
So in the book, The Triple Focus, we outline the next, what we think are the next steps. And I would like to see mindfulness as part of every SEL and SEL in every classroom. That's one thing. I'd like to see loving kindness or kindness as a focus in addition. And I also feel that a systems approach is very important, helping kids understand this complex world that they're growing up in, so they're better able to face the challenges that they're going to have over their lifetime.
Yeah. I think the rate of change is going to be so rapid, isn't it, in the next 20 years with artificial intelligence and coding, robotics, all this, that we need to hold on to the connection and the empathy and compassion and things. So that's great. So we have a lot of people who are researching in schools, trying to bring more mindfulness research with children. So do you have any advice to those people about how, we keep hearing in the media that the research isn't rigorous enough, or there's not enough good studies. So what could they do to improve that?
Well, when Richard Davidson and I looked at the 6,000 peer-reviewed studies on meditation, we found 60. That's a small portion.
Yeah.
But what made them excellent are two simple things.
Okay.
Help the rigor of studies in school. One is that they used what's called an active control.
Right.
You don't just have kids do mindfulness and have teachers be very positive about that. You have a comparison group that don't do mindfulness, but might do some kind of calisthenic or something that the teacher also feels positive about. That's a big, important control. The two things, one of the most important, I think, is to have a active control group. And the other is to use objective measures, not just self-reports, not just kids feel better or teachers say the classroom is better, but to have some kind of objective measure that isn't influenced by people's subjective bias. Those two things make studies extremely strong.
Okay. Yeah. So something to work on. I'm doing mine now as well. So I'll keep those in mind. So can you tell us a little bit about why did you get into mindfulness, and what's your personal journey with mindfulness that makes it so important to you?
I started to meditate in college because I was anxious.
Okay.
They calmed me down.
Right.
And then I actually, when I was a graduate student at Harvard, they sent me to India for 15 months, and I studied meditation, mindfulness. I got involved for my own personal practice in what's called insight meditation, which is the original source of the mindfulness technique, or one of them.
Yeah.
And when I came back to Cambridge, one of my friends there was a fellow named John Kabat-Zinn.
Okay.
He's Mr. Mindfulness today.
Yes. Mr. Mindfulness.
And another was my friend Richard Davidson, who became a scientist. And Davidson and I reviewed all of the literature on it. But I've been an advocate of mindfulness, both because I personally experienced it and thought it was beneficial, and second, because I'm familiar with research findings that show that, yes, it's not just some impression that it's positive and helpful, but it really does make a difference.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a lot of times it's our personal experience with it that then makes us want to share it with kids in schools and things. So can you tell us some of the most innovative or interesting strategies that you've seen used in classrooms that you've visited that are practicing mindfulness?
I'm not that familiar with all of the different methods being used in classrooms.
Right, okay.
I do know that some of the instruction is migrating to phones and iPads.
Yeah.
And that may be a way to engage this generation of students who are so glued, sadly, to their phones, particularly, is through an app that's aimed at kids, and those are being developed. Some are out there already. Yeah, there's lots of great technology, but then on the other hand, it can be something that's really distracting, and I think we have to be careful there, don't we, with with balance, especially with the really young kids, who should be playing and things like that. So I heard you say that when we widen the gap between impulse and stress, that is what mindfulness does for us. So can you explain how we practically do that, or how we teach kids to do that in a Yes.
classroom?
Actually, it's not between impulse and stress. It's between impulse and action.
Impulse and action. Okay.
Yes. So, you may get hijacked, and you may have this impulse like, I should slug that kid. And if you wait, it's better.
Right. First point. Yeah.
And Paul Ekman, a famous emotions researcher, says that that's actually a definition of maturity. That the ability to do that marks how mature you become. In the brain, what it means is that you're able to inhibit the prefrontal area, the executive centers can say no to impulses that come from the emotional centers, particularly the amygdala. And mindfulness strengthens the centers that say no. So it helps children be more resistant to that first impulse, and they're able to think things over. And, SEL programs use other methods. Like one is a stop sign in the classroom. It's a poster says, When you're upset, remember the stop sign, not the stop sign, the traffic light.
Yeah.
Red light, stop, calm down, think before you act. Yellow light, think of a range of things you could do. Green light, pick the best one and try it out, see what happens. And that's another way to reinforce for kids what mindfulness is empowering their brains to do, which is to stop and think rather than just react.
Perfect. Great. And just before we finish, I just wanted to ask you, what are your impressions of this work over the last 20 years? Has it developed as fast as you would like to see it develop, or do you think there's still a lot of work to do? And perhaps maybe are some countries more ahead of other countries in bringing in these types of things?
Well, I don't know which countries are ahead. I know that Singapore is the first country to have all of its students do SEL. But in Singapore, because Singapore is just one city. Yeah. But I think that over the last 20 years, I've actually been impressed at the speed and breadth of the spread of these programs. First SEL and then mindfulness, which is really zooming ahead. Yeah. And I think that's good, but we have a long way to go. We're still in the minority of classrooms. Most kids still don't have access to these methods. I'd like to see that spread more. And I think that the more those methods spread, the better citizens children will grow up to be, and the better off countries will be.
Yeah, definitely. I agree 100%. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Daniel. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know you're very busy, and this will be a great insight for all the people watching. So thank you.
Terrific. Thanks for what you're doing.
Thanks.